So let's say you're the 22-year-old
Yep.
graduating from college. You have a degree. You are most likely in debt. Let's say best case scenario, you've been plugged in through a church, a local church, through those 4 years. What advice do you give those people as they're looking at their long-term future?
Yeah. I think to go come from the big picture to the smaller picture, first, they have to get a mindset that says, I realize that I've studied a certain thing, and I realize I've got a degree in a certain area, but they've got to be open enough to God's calling to really be able to answer this question honestly. Am I willing to do anything that God wants me to do as long as he makes it clear that it's him wanting me to do it? And I think that's the secret to really beginning to understand God's call in your life, and particularly finding direction. Because what I find is when I talk to people and I ask them that, they go, well, there's some things I might not want to do. Well, you've really got to come to that place and be honest with yourself and honest before God that, I am willing to do anything. And I'm telling you, God is more interested in telling people what he's called them to do than most of us are willing to receive it. I say all the time, I used to think about it this way. I would say, okay, God, kind of give me the 5-year plan. Let me think about it over the weekend, and then we'll get back on Monday and we'll work out some bugs, and then we'll roll it out, because I had this kind of business mind's mentality. And God doesn't work that way. It's very clear in the scriptures as we see examples of him calling certain people that you really have to lay down all your wants and your desire and be willing to embrace whatever God has for you. And if you can get to that place, everything else starts to open up. The other thing I hear all the time is that Christians say, well, God opened this door, and it must be what he wants me to do. I think you have to be really careful about that, because there's some open doors that God wants us to walk by, and there's other doors that may be slammed in our face, and God wants us to stand in front of it and beat on it until it opens. I think of Wilberforce. He spent 20 years trying to get this one bill passed to end slavery. How many of us would have given up long before that? And so you really have to get a sense of what it is God wants you to do and not let circumstances drive that.
So you're saying for the the person newly entering the workforce, or even newly entering college for that matter, the motivating factor for your thoughts should be a Christian motivation first and foremost.
Absolutely. Because I think one of the problems, people say, well, make sure you go study something that you can get a job doing. Well, I'm not really sure that that's the best advice in the world, because you start a career now and decide you're going to be a aerospace engineer, and by the time you graduate, there are no jobs in aerospace engineering, 5-6 years later. The job market changes so much, particularly the technology side of the job market, that I think you have to be careful to say, I'm just going to look after myself and I'm going to do what's best for me. Particularly as a Christian, I think that's a trap many of us unfortunately fall into.